CNN has learned that two top Ukrainian officials will present the Biden administration with a list of targets inside Russia. A Ukrainian lawmaker tells CNN that face-to-face meetings are set to happen before the week is out in an effort to push the U.S. to lift restrictions on the use of American weapons against Russia. This comes after Moscow launched what Ukraine is calling another massive aerial attack on Kyiv. The overnight strike is Russia's third on the Ukrainian capital in the past 4 days. At the same time, a fire is raging at an oil depot in Russia's southern region of Rostov, hit by a Ukrainian drone. It's worth noting, since Ukraine took the fight to Russia's soil just weeks ago, it says it has taken more than 100 Russian settlements. Ukraine's shock incursion into Russian territory earlier this month appears to be turning into a longer-term strategy. We're hearing that from CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh, who joins us now live. Nick, you've been delving into Ukraine's motivations in recent weeks as they've made this extraordinary push into Russia. What do you think President Zelensky's real goal is here?
I think with the bid to try and get the United States through the Biden administration and both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, to whom his officials are presenting this list of potential targets that they want to hit with US supplied weaponry, I think they're trying to allay fears that if they were given permission to strike deeper inside Russia with US supplied weaponry, that they could end up hitting a wider range of targets or even civilian targets by mistake. They're trying to look specific and precise about what they indeed want to hit. But at the same time, by putting forward this list, I think they're also trying to push being a Russia hawk as part of the US presidential campaign. They're essentially daring one of those three politicians to back away from providing them with these permissions. And it comes too after a week in which Ukraine has been on the receiving end of a Russian bombardment of over 400 drones and missiles. Just last night, 79 aerial objects fired at Ukraine, 60 drones shot down, 2 missiles shot down, but 3 missiles do appear to have gotten through. Now, we don't always have great transparency about what's being hit, but it's often energy infrastructure, and it's a bid to make the life of ordinary Ukrainians in the punishing heat of summer and in the forthcoming cold of winter as unlivable as indeed is possible. But we're in a fascinating moment in the war here, of very fast-paced changing events. Yes, there is the incursion into Kursk, now 3 weeks old, which appears to have taken 100 settlements, caused mass evacuations, and according to Ukraine, diverted 30,000 Russian troops from the Ukrainian front lines, potentially causing some weakness there. But we're also learning in the last 24 hours of what seems like a Ukrainian bid to push into Belgorod, to the south of where you're seeing on the map there, near Vovchansk and Kharkiv. Now, that's key because it puts extra pressure on Russian forces, suggests that Ukraine may be looking to make another incursion into Russia and expand this hugely embarrassing moment for the Kremlin. And on top of that too, this incursion is being packaged as part of one of 4 points by President Volodymyr Zelensky of how he hopes to, quote, end the war in September. The other 3 points involve economic pressure, diplomacy possibly, and other issues too. But it isn't clear exactly how he intends to push forwards. What is utterly clear is that Ukraine is throwing everything it can at the war right now. It's trying to catch the Russians off guard in their own territory. It's firing back with an extraordinary array of Ukrainian long-range drones and missiles, hitting targets already deep inside Russia without this US permission to use US-supplied weapons. I think that is slowly having a toll on the Russian economy, perhaps in the minds of some Russians, although they live in a very sanitized environment of state-controlled media. Maybe some of them are beginning to wonder why billowing smoke is now a not uncommon feature in some southern and western towns. And so questions mounting, really, I think, as to the effectiveness of Putin's strategy here. But I have to give you one broader thing. This is not all good news for Kiev. Russian forces are still moving towards a key Ukrainian military hub called Pokrovsk. They've been moving faster, I think, than many expected, and they show no signs of slowing, despite all the ancillary issues for the Kremlin around that singular advance. And indeed, if Russia takes Pokrovsk, that could be very damaging for Ukraine's front lines and expose large swathes of Ukraine to future Russian advances. So a vast amount happening here in just the past month or so, and I think we'll see similarly fast-paced changes in the month ahead, Frederica.
And I wonder, Nick, is Ukraine running short on supplies and money? Can it keep up with this new phase of the war?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how well they're doing, frankly. We do know that they appear to have, from what I saw going into Kursk recently, they appear to have quite a lot of weaponry they're able to throw at that offensive of choice, maybe to the sacrifice of other areas. They appear to have a lot of longer range drones and missiles they can use to push deeper into Russia and hit targets there. So there's no obvious signs of a Ukrainian munitions crisis. I think they're financially doing okay from Western support. The area where they are having issues, though, is manpower. They're struggling to replenish their ranks, certainly in the eastern front lines too. And that may be the clock that is ticking most loudly in Zelensky's mind at the moment. They have winter coming. That tends to always slow fighting down, although the Russians tend to put a lot in to trying to move forwards in the winter months. But I think, too, Zelensky eyeing the US elections, there's still a 50% chance that Donald Trump will win, and he thinks he can end the war in 24 hours, although he won't say exactly how. And so I believe Ukraine is doing all they can to make sure the position they're in ahead of November is as strong as possible in case they're forced to the negotiating table in terms they don't like, or in case they find that NATO support for them with a reluctant US new president begins to dry up, Frederica.
All right. Nick Payton-Walsh, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much.
Let's bring in CNN's Oren Lieberman, who joins us now from the Pentagon with more. Oren, give us a sense of what the goal is for Ukraine with this visit.
Rahel, the goal of this visit from two of Ukraine's top officials is to try to press and convince the Biden administration to ease restrictions on the use of U.S. weapons against Russia and in Russia. So far, Ukraine is only allowed to use U.S. weaponry right across the border in a fairly small area. They want to be able to use some of the U.S. long-range weapons against priority targets inside of Russia, and that's what they're here for. They'll present a list of priority targets deeper inside Russia to the Biden administration in the hopes that U.S. will loosen or ease the restrictions on the use of U.S. weapons by Ukraine. Those two officials, Andriy Yermak, the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, and Rustem Umerov, Ukraine's defense minister, will be here tomorrow for those meetings. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made it clear why he believes the U.S. and others should ease those restrictions so they can hit longer-range targets inside of Russia.
Lifting the restrictions on long-range strikes for Ukraine now will help us to end the war as soon as possible in a fair way for Ukraine and the world as a whole.
A Ukrainian lawmaker says it's important to change the restrictions and ease those restrictions so that Ukraine is able to change the course of the war.
And Oren, what's the likelihood that this visit would actually shift or move the U.S. position on this?
So far, the U.S. has indicated they're not changing, or at least haven't changed so far, the restrictions on the use of long-range weapons. We have seen Ukraine use U.S.-made long-range ATACMS missiles against priority targets in Crimea, in occupied Crimea, such as air defense systems. And it's important to notice the context of all of this. Ukraine is pushing on its Kursk offensive from its northern border into Russia, in which it's still able to gain some territory. Meanwhile, at the same time, in eastern Ukraine, on the front lines there, Russia is able to gain some territory as it pushes on its own Kharkiv offensive, which has been moving over the course of the summer. So even though the U.S. hasn't changed its position just yet, the Ukraine has noticed over and over again what we've seen repeatedly, and that's that the U.S. and specifically the Biden administration will very often say, no, 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 yes. We've seen that with Patriots. We've seen that with F-16s, Abrams tanks. And this is clearly what Ukraine is hoping for now, that when it comes to restrictions on weapons, the U.S. will once again say, no, 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 yes.
Hopefully for Ukraine. Yeah, we'll see if that happens and if this visit is what gets them there. Oren Lieberman, live for us at the Pentagon. Oren, thank you.